Welcome to another episode of Bassing with Captain Lou. Guys, I know it's been a minute. My apologies, but today's video is about power fluking. What in the world is power fluking? You guys got to stick around because this is going to be a pretty fun video. So power fluking, what is it? I came across this pattern a little while back, and the reason why I wanted to share with you guys is because right now our Everglades is going through a unique situation. And I'm going to cover a lot of those things in a lot greater detail in another video called Late Summer, Early Fall Patterns in the Everglades. But nonetheless, I'm going to briefly tell you guys what's going on in this video. What's going on right now is we have had a lot of rain this summer. We just a hurricane came through and it dumped a lot of water as well. And on top of that, they're dumping water from Lake Okeechobee. So this area is saturated with water. And because of that saturation, there is a lot of current. So high water, a lot of current. It is extremely hot because you guys can see I'm very wet right now with sweat, and it's very humid. So you put all those factors together and it makes fishing out here pretty tough. But because of these conditions, I've been forced to adapt in order to find these bass and figure out what they're doing. And then I stumbled across power fluking. Stick around, I'm gonna go into detail in regards to this technique. Power fluking. So basically it's a form of power fishing, okay? It's not rocket science. It's a form of power fishing. You need very stout equipment, okay? You need very stout terminal tackle, and then of course, you gotta use a fluke. Now flukes comes in different styles and different brands. You guys throw whatever you see fit, whatever color you see fit. It's up to you guys to decide that. However, the technique is a little specific, and I'm gonna go into these details right now. So before I dive in and how to fish this bait and this technique, I gotta dive into the gear first. And like I mentioned, you gotta use stout gear. In today's video, what I'm throwing is I'm throwing a Dobyns Champion 735. If you guys are familiar with the Champion line of Dobyns, the 735 is their workhorse. I consider it a medium heavy, but in Dobyns considers it a heavy. But nonetheless, it's a stout rod. It has great backbone, especially when you look over my shoulder and you got these lily pads and stuff over my shoulder. This rod right here does a great job in horsing the fish out of that cover. Moving into the line, what I'm doing right now is I'm throwing 50-pound Power Pro. As you guys can see, it's yellow, and the reason for it's because it's yellow is because when I'm fishing this type of deep vegetation and this stuff over my shoulder, this bright line is like a strike indicator for me. So I go ahead and spool it with this type of line. So as far as the reel is concerned, I'm throwing a Shimano Curado, okay? This is a 7-speed. As you guys can see here, this is not the stock handle. This is a Hogtech handle. The reason why I love these Hogtech handles is because it allows me to really crank down on these fish and horse them out of cover. So that's why this is like my heavy fishing gear is this one right here. So that covers my reel and my rod. The last important piece of this puzzle that you guys have to take into account is this guy right here. It's the hook, okay? You need to use a Superline type of hook. In this case, I'm using an Owner hook. I love Owner and I love Gamakatsu hooks, especially their Superline hooks. And the reason for it is this. These suckers right here do not open. It takes a lot of effort to open these hooks. And you need that type of stout hook when you're fishing, again, this type of cover, because when you horse that bass out of there, the last thing you want to do is lose a beautiful bass because your hook opened. So you got to use stout hooks, and in this case, I'm using a 4-aught extra wide gap hook, and like I said, it's an Owner hook. Now, in regards to the bait, in this case, I'm using a Zoom Super Fluke. This happens to be their 5 1/4 length fluke. Again, you guys could use whichever brand you like. I just happen to like Zoom a lot. But I want to go ahead and show you guys how I rig this bait. I rig it 2 ways. The first way I rig it is the standard way, where you just take the hook itself, you come on down the length of the nose here, and you just pop it right through the crease. You come all the way up, and here's where my difference is. I go ahead and I rig it deep, so meaning there is no hook point exposure in this fluke. As you guys can see here, the hook is hidden. And the reason why that hook is hidden is because, again, because of the type of cover I'm fishing. This is a deep cover, a deep to medium type of cover presentation, and a lot of this is spatter dock. So the last thing you want is the hook point to get hooked on that type of cover. So what happens here is I hide the hook point. I call this the standard rigging. If you guys saw some of my previous videos, I go into different styles of rigging that I do in regards to the Fluke. And this is what I consider the standard style. Okay, and now the next way I rig this, I rig it the opposite way. I bring the hook out the other way. So I just do the same thing, hook point through, I bring it around. Now the only difference is now I put it through the back of the Fluke and it comes out through its underside between these two flaps and between the Fluke right here. You see that? So the hook point is hidden right inside that Fluke right there. And again, it just brings it, it gives it a different characteristic in the water, especially in these little shallow pockets. And plus the hook point is exposed and protected. So when the bass hits, that hook pops right out and hooks into the bass. So again, these are the two methods that I use for rigging the Fluke when it comes to power fluking. Okay, so why am I throwing this technique and why am I call it power fluking? Reason being is because, as I mentioned, our conditions, we have a lot of current right now in some of our systems. However, I picked up on the fact that some of these bass, or a lot of these bass, and the peacock as well, they're not always in this current. They need a break, they need to get out of that current, and they need to hide. The two ways of doing that is they either hide in deep, deep structure where there's a current break and they sit in those type of structures, and I'll get into that like I said in my other video. And then the other one is they go into deep vegetation on the sides of these canal systems where it breaks the current and it gives them a chance to catch their breath, so to speak. So all I'm simply doing is taking advantage of that breather. I call it a breather, but they're just holding tight the cover. I just call it a breather. But nonetheless, I'm taking advantage of that cover and I'm going ahead and I'm throwing this Fluke inside these deep vegetation pockets. And I tell you what, when a bass is in the vicinity and this Fluke lands in their lair, the explosions are unbelievable and the bass are pretty good size as well. Another important point I want to cover is this is not like a far casting type of technique. This is what I call medium to close range application. Because it's a weightless technique, like you guys can see here, there's no weight to this. I can't throw this Fluke with this style of rod too far. So I'm away from the bank a little bit. I find the pockets and I go ahead and throw this Fluke inside of those pockets. So where specifically do you want to be throwing this type of application? Again, I like throwing it in clusters of vegetation. The more the merrier as far as the vegetation. When you got some Kissimmee, you got some pencil grass, you got some spatterdock, and you got some other types of vegetations and clusters, that's where I want to be focusing my attention, especially right up on the bank. I mean, like literally right up on the bank. That's where I find that these bass are holding and that shallow type of cover. And again, like when you find that right cover, you're going to know right away that there's a bass there. Now, you got to cover a lot of water. I'm not saying that this is a slam dunk of a technique. You got to cover a lot of water out here, especially in our conditions right now. But again, when you come across them, you're going to find some nice ones. Now, hook setting on this type of situation. I am guilty. I'm the first one guilty of setting prematurely. I am guilty of that. I'm not going to lie to you guys. You guys know that. When this Fluke gets hit, there's going to be a lot of commotion on the water. There's going to be a big explosion. They don't get this lure gently when you land in their lair. There's going to be a lot of commotion. You got to give yourself a split second or two to observe if the Fluke has been taken. Especially, and I'm going to emphasize this again, especially when it comes to peacocks. Bass, a little bit more forgiving. You could tell the hit right away, but with a big peacock, they like making a lot of commotion and they don't really grab it. But when they do, it's going to be a lot of fun. So give yourself a moment before you rear back and set the hook. So power fluking, just to recap, you guys need a strong rod, a strong reel, heavy braid, and a stout hook. Be very patient with the technique. Take your time and break down the cover along those current breaks. And you guys are going to come across some nice bass if you play your cards right. Thank you guys for taking the time of watching this power fluking video. like this video, share this video, better yet, subscribe. We just went over 500 subscribers, and now my goal is 1,000, but in order to do that, I need your guys' help. Smash that subscribe button if you like this video, and if you didn't, that's okay too. Still love you, but comment down below and let me know what kind of content you would like for future stuff. But again, guys, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys again soon.